If you had been asked to paint a picture of perfect peace, what would your painting have looked like? Would your image have been more like the first one in our story this morning, of sunshine, serene mountain lake, perfect calm? Or more like the second, a tiny bird at rest in the midst of a storm? At first thought, I would not have made the choice made by the king. Informed by popular conceptions of what it means to be at peace, I would have chosen the mountain lake. But these times in which we live, and the realities of our days make clear that the real challenge to us of finding peace is represented by the painting of that little bird in the storm. Without understanding the situation of that little bird, how can we ever imagine finding a personal sense of peace in our time? When the most popular definition of peace is freedom from disturbance or perturbation, and each day we are bombarded by news of the chaos wreaked because of the coronavirus, and made more acutely aware than ever before, perhaps, of our own mortality. When each day we are bombarded by tweets so often inciting hate and deepening political, philosophical, and religious divisions. And each day it is as likely as not we will hear of the murder in our streets of another person of color, when mostly peaceful protesters are defamed. When peace is defined as an absence of noise, and we are bombarded by too many words, their veracity so often questioned these days, or the quiet of our nights interrupted by the sounds of gunshots in our neighborhoods, when there is emotional and physical violence in our homes and in our neighborhoods, when simply walking out our front doors, going to work or going to the grocery store can be hazardous, then how can we hope to experience a sense of peace? If we cannot be at peace in the midst of these ever-present storms of discord and disaster, of conflicts within our homes and in our hearts, then peace is as elusive as a butterfly, ever fluttering before us, or lying torn and broken on the road ahead. And so we must find our own ways to peace in the midst of chaos. In his pastoral prayer this morning, John recited words from the Chinese philosopher Lao Tzu, words that for many years have been a mantra for me, words well worth repeating here. If there is to be peace in the world, there must be peace among nations. If there is to be peace in the nations, there must be peace in the cities. If there is to be peace in the cities, there must be peace between neighbors. If there is to be peace between neighbors, there must be peace in the home. If there is to be peace in the home, there must be peace in the heart. What does it mean to you to have peace in your heart? What does it feel like? When I ask myself this question, take a deep breath, maybe recall some other time when I felt a sense of peace. In a flash, every muscle may relax. And even if just for a moment, all those anxieties, worries, fears, angers, and woes that I have tucked away in my body throughout a lifetime diminish. if just for a moment. Imagining what peace feels like, I am able to let go, to be in the moment, and experience a sense of oneness with the universe. It's in moments like this that I think lies my ideal of a world at peace. But I fear that will never be. Howard Thurman, one of the great preachers of the 20th century, named the challenge, and I quote, "How to get beyond one's anxiety and trouble to the center of one's own spirit is one of the most formidable hurdles to serenity and inner peace." His answer? What the folk spirit has discerned through the ages of living and struggling becomes the core of the self-conscious procedure of the deeply religious man or woman. It is not a single act, but a thing that must be done over and over until at last peace has come. End quote. Thurman was writing, of course, of millennia-old practices that contribute to a sense of peace. We get there through meditation, prayer, and yoga, Tai Chi, walks in the woods, by recalling cherished moments in our lives. And for me, on occasion, sitting on the porch at my husband's farm in the Catskills, gazing at the pond. Excuse me. If we think that to be at peace means to be absent of change, absent of conflict, everyone being nice to everyone else all the time, then we are deluding ourselves. Peace as the enduring absence of anxiety or conflict or noise, free of disturbance or perturbation, is as much an illusion as is the perfect peacefulness of a mountain lake or a sparklingly clear night sky. One blissful summer afternoon at the farm demonstrated that. I approached the pond, entranced by the reflection of irises, pines, and oaks on its blue glass surface, inspired to a state of peace. As I neared the pond, a frog leapt from the shore. It startled me from my peace, and just as that frog hit the water, a bass appeared from nowhere. Bass's mouth and frog's torso became as one. Then in one swift, great gulp, that frog was gone, and so was the bass. A semblance of peace was restored. The real world is much more akin to the world of that frog, the bass, and me, of that mother bird in the winning painting. And those who are the peacemakers, blessed are they know it. Peacemakers know all too well that the path to real peace is turbulent, often fraught with violence, long, long coming, and never, ever, everlasting. For there to be peace in our neighborhoods, in our cities, within our nations, and among the nations, there must be peace in our hearts. When we are centered, when we have a sure sense of who we are and what we believe, there may be peace in our hearts. We may be inspired to act for the good, firmly and with long-term commitment. Think Martin Luther King. Think Gandhi. Think Franklin Roosevelt and Winston Churchill. Think protesters today. Blessed are the peacemakers. I do, by the way, truly believe the protesters have the potential of being seen as the peacemakers of our time, if those in power listen well. Think Frederick Douglass, too. Those who tore down a statue of him in Rochester last Sunday night, on the anniversary of one of his most famous speeches, they were not peacemakers. They didn't have the courage to remove that statue in the light of day, nor to say why they were doing it. That speech, delivered before the Rochester Ladies Anti-Slavery Society, a group we may presume to have been predominantly white, delivered 9 years before the Civil War began on the 5th of July in 1852, that speech is referred to as his 4th of July speech. Douglass began with praise for the founders of this country. Quote, "They were great men, great enough to give frame to a great age. They were statesmen, patriots, and heroes." He then asked, "Why am I called upon to speak here today? What have I or those I represent to do with your national independence?" End quote. He reviewed several items, several themes central to arguments against slavery, said everyone knew what those arguments were, and everyone knew that slavery was wrong. Upon completion of that litany, he said something that we might well have heard, perhaps not so eloquently, in recent weeks, as inequities and injustices against people of color have been so harshly illumined as a result of the pandemic. And I quote Douglass, "At a time like this, scorching irony, not convincing argument, is needed. Oh, had I the ability and could reach the nation's ear, I would today pour out a fiery stream of biting ridicule, blasting reproach, withering sarcasm, and stern rebuke. For it is not light that is needed, but fire. It is not the gentle shower, but thunder. We need the storm, the whirlwind, and the earthquake. The feeling of the nation must be quickened. The conscience of the nation must be roused. The propriety of the nation must be startled. The hypocrisy of the nation must be exposed. And its crimes against God and man must be proclaimed and denounced." David Blight, author of the Pulitzer Prize-winning biography, Frederick Douglass, wrote of the lamentable period, almost 25 years after that 4th of July speech was delivered. He wrote of the time when Reconstruction already was being dismantled, when Blacks were being killed for attempting to register to vote, when ballot boxes in certain towns were being burned after the promise of 40 acres and a mule had been rescinded. Blight wrote, "A worried Douglass took to the road wherever invited, warning desperately of a forgetful, money, and blood-drenched peace that seemed to take the body politic. That peace, in quotation marks, was characterized by, this is me, by complacence, by the silence of complicity." And then Blight went on. Douglass demanded from a New Hampshire crowd in early 1875, and this is a direct quote of Douglass, quote, "not a peace which rested on one man's standing on the neck of another, but a peace which arises out of equal justice and equal rights to all. I'm going to repeat that. Frederick Douglass said in 1875, 145 years ago, there are two kinds of peace. What we need is not a peace which rested on one man's standing on the neck of another, but a peace which arises out of equal justice and equal rights for all. Not long before he delivered the New Hampshire speech, he had spoken to a predominantly Black community in Washington, D.C. He had urged his listeners to fight the political war being fought against them with what he called the tools of peace: voting, getting an education, and working for a living wage. Blessed are the peacemakers. Blessed are their voices, and may they be heard this time. I want to end with some lines from a poem quoted by Frederick Douglass at the end of his 4th of July speech 170 years ago. God speed the day when human blood shall cease to flow. In every clime be understood the claims of human brotherhood, and each return for evil good, not blow for blow. That day will come all feuds to end and change into a faithful friend each foe. May it be so. Amen.